My name is Chip. I am 58 years old, and I built my construction company from nothing but calloused hands and determination. My daughter Jessica's wedding day should have been perfect. I had dreamed of it since she was born. Instead, it became a day of humiliation when my new son-in-law Derek pulled my chair away as I sat down. The physical pain of hitting the floor was nothing compared to the laughter that followed. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to stand tall when others tried to bring you down. I started my construction business 30 years ago with just a pickup truck and a toolbox. Back then, I was newly married to Margaret, the love of my life, and we were expecting our first child. When Jessica was born, she became my whole world. I would come home covered in sawdust and cement, but would always clean up just to hold her for a few precious minutes before she went to sleep. Our life was not extravagant, but it was filled with love. Margaret was a kindergarten teacher who put her heart and soul into her students. We saved every penny we could for Jessica's future. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that I had renovated myself in a middle-class neighborhood in Minneapolis. Our weekends were spent at local parks, community events, and occasionally at my parents' cabin by Lake Minnetonka. Everything changed when Jessica turned 15. Margaret was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer that had already spread throughout her body. The doctors gave her 6 months, but my strong-willed wife fought for almost a year before she passed away. Those months were the hardest of my life, trying to keep the business afloat while taking Margaret to treatments and supporting Jessica through the trauma of watching her mother fade away. After Margaret died, it was just Jessica and me against the world. I threw myself into being both mother and father to her. I learned to cook her favorite meals awkwardly, helped her shop for prom dresses, and stayed up late to help with school projects. My business suffered as I prioritized being there for my daughter, but I never regretted it. Jessica was all I had left of Margaret, and I would have done anything for her. Despite our grief, Jessica thrived in high school. She was on the honor roll, played volleyball, and was popular among her peers. I was so proud of her resilience. When college acceptance letters started arriving, I realized how quickly our time together was coming to an end. She was accepted to several prestigious universities, including Northwestern University in Chicago. The tuition was steep, nearly $60,000 per year with room and board. I had saved for her education, but the medical bills from Margaret's illness had depleted much of our savings. Still, I was determined that Jessica would have this opportunity. I took out a second mortgage on our house, picked up additional contracting jobs on weekends, and eventually made the difficult decision to sell my parents' cabin. That property had been in my family for 3 generations, full of memories of fishing trips with my father and summer barbecues with Margaret. Selling it felt like losing a piece of my history, but Jessica's future was more important. When I drove Jessica to Northwestern that first day, we both cried. I helped her set up her dorm room, meeting her roommate, and making sure she had everything she needed. Before leaving, I gave her a locket that had belonged to Margaret, containing a tiny photo of the 3 of us. "Your mom would be so proud of you," I told her. "Call me anytime, day or night." During her freshman year, Jessica called almost daily. She would tell me about her classes, her new friends, and the challenges of college life. I lived for those calls. By sophomore year, they became less frequent, maybe once or twice a week. I told myself this was normal, healthy even. She was building her own life. It was during her junior year that Jessica met Derek. He was a senior studying finance from a wealthy family in Connecticut. When she first mentioned him, her voice had a different quality to it, lighter, more excited. I was happy for her, but also felt the first twinge of being replaced. Jessica brought Derek home during spring break that year. He arrived in an expensive car wearing designer clothes and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He shook my hand firmly, complimenting my quaint house in a tone that made it clear it was not a compliment. Throughout his visit, he spoke about his family's vacation home in the Hamptons, his father's connections on Wall Street, and his plans to join a prestigious investment firm after graduation. "Your daughter is quite the find," he told me one evening while Jessica was upstairs. "A diamond in the rough, if you will." The way he said it made my skin crawl, as if he had discovered Jessica despite her background, rather than because of who she was. I noticed small changes in Jessica during that visit. She winced when I used the wrong fork at dinner. She quickly changed the subject when I mentioned a large construction project my company had recently secured. When Derek made subtle jabs about blue-collar work, she laughed along instead of defending me. After they returned to school, Jessica's calls became even less frequent. When we did speak, she talked mostly about Derek, his family, and the exciting future they were planning. She spent the following summer interning at a firm in New York, staying with Derek's family, instead of coming home. By the time Jessica graduated, she was practically a stranger to me. She had adopted the mannerisms, clothing style, and even the slight accent of Derek's social circle. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. I wanted her to be happy, but I could not shake the feeling that Derek saw her as an accessory rather than a partner. The wedding planning began immediately, orchestrated primarily by Derek's mother, Sylvia, a formidable woman who ran a charity foundation and treated wedding planning like a military campaign. When I offered to contribute financially, Jessica awkwardly told me that Derek's parents insisted on paying for everything. "They have a vision, Dad," she explained over the phone, "and they have relationships with all the right vendors. It will be easier this way." I was being sidelined from my own daughter's wedding, but I swallowed my pride. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart," I said, though happiness was far from what I felt. In the months leading up to the wedding, I was rarely consulted about anything. The engagement party was held at Derek's parents' country club, where I felt completely out of place among their friends who discussed stock portfolios and vacation properties. Several guests mistook me for one of the servers. Jessica and Derek purchased a luxury condo in downtown Chicago as their first home with substantial help from his parents. When I visited, Jessica gave me a quick tour, but seemed embarrassed by my presence, especially when Derek's friends stopped by unexpectedly. "Maybe wear something a bit more formal next time, Dad," she suggested after they left, eyeing my comfortable jeans and flannel shirt with disapproval. I had driven 4 hours straight from a job site to see her, but that context did not seem to matter anymore. As the wedding approached, I realized that the deep connection I once shared with my daughter had eroded into something superficial. She had chosen a new family, one that offered her status and luxury, rather than the simple, hard-working values I had raised her with. Still, I held on to hope that our relationship could be repaired once the stress of the wedding was behind us. How wrong I was. The week of the wedding arrived with beautiful early June weather in the upscale Chicago suburb where Derek's family lived. I checked into the hotel where the wedding party was staying, a luxury establishment with valet parking and staff who looked at my weathered pickup truck with barely concealed disdain. The wedding welcome bags in my room contained expensive champagne gourmet chocolates and an itinerary printed on heavy cardstock with gold foil lettering. The schedule was packed with events, a golf outing, a spa day, the rehearsal dinner, and finally, the wedding itself. Next to the golf outing was a note, reserved for groom's side. The spa day was similarly designated for the bridal party, and mother of the bride a role that would have been Margaret's. There was no specific event for me, the father of the bride. I called Jessica to let her know I had arrived safely. She answered breathlessly, clearly in the middle of something. "Oh, Dad, great. Listen, there has been a change to the rehearsal dinner seating. Mrs. Harrington needed to accommodate some last-minute guests from their side, so you will be at table 8 instead of the family table." "Table 8?" I asked, confused. "But I am immediate family." "I know, Dad, but the head table is already full with me, Derek, his parents, the maid of honor, and best man. Table 8 is still a good table," she added quickly. "Anyway, I have to go. Hair and makeup consultation. See you tonight." The call ended before I could respond. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, feeling the distance between us expand with every passing hour. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. I arrived early wearing the new suit I had purchased specifically for the wedding events. It had cost nearly $1,000 more than I had ever spent on clothing, but I wanted to fit in for Jessica's sake. As guests arrived, I stood awkwardly near the entrance, watching Derek's parents greet their friends with air kisses and inside jokes. Jessica was surrounded by her bridesmaids, looking beautiful, but somehow different, transformed into someone who belonged in this world of wealth and pretension. Derek approached with 2 of his groomsmen, all in perfectly tailored suits. "Chip, the man of the hour," he said loudly, clapping me on the shoulder. "Or, well, not quite the man of the hour. That would be me." His friends laughed as if he had said something incredibly witty. "Congratulations again, Derek," I said, extending my hand. "Jessica looks beautiful tonight." "She always does," he replied. "My father spent a fortune on that dress. Worth every penny, though, right, boys?" More laughter followed. "Better grab a seat, Chip. I think you are way in the back. We had to make room for some important clients of my father's." I found my way to table 8, located in a corner far from the main action. My table mates were a distant cousin of Derek's, who lived abroad, and barely spoke English, an elderly great-aunt, who was hard of hearing, and several work colleagues of Derek's father, who spent the entire evening discussing people and places I knew nothing about. From my isolated position, I watched as toasts were made. Derek's father spoke at length about welcoming Jessica into their family and how she had blossomed under their guidance. Derek's mother tearfully expressed how she had always wanted a daughter. The best man told embarrassing stories from Derek's prep school days. At no point was I invited to speak. The father of the bride, traditionally given a place of honor at such events, had been rendered invisible. As the evening wound down, I overheard one of Derek's friends near the bar. "Can you believe Jessica's dad, total redneck? Derek says he practically had to teach her which fork to use when they first met." Another chimed in, "I heard he builds houses or something. With his hands." They laughed as if manual labor was the height of comedy. "Derek says she's completely reinvented herself since freshman year. You would never know she grew up in some middle-class neighborhood in Minnesota now." Their words stung, but what hurt more was knowing that Derek had likely been the source of these characterizations. My daughter's fiancé was mocking her background, our life together, and by extension, her mother's memory. I left the rehearsal dinner early, claiming fatigue from the drive. In reality, I could not bear to watch my daughter orbit around these people who looked down on everything I was, everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for her. Back in my hotel room, I took out an old photo of Jessica at her high school graduation, standing between me and Margaret's sister Anna, who had become a surrogate mother figure after Margaret's death. Jessica's smile in that photo was genuine, unpolished, by expensive cosmetic dentistry or practiced for social media. I wondered if that girl still existed somewhere inside the stranger my daughter had become. The morning of the wedding brought perfect weather and a flurry of activity. I had expected to be included in the pre-ceremony preparations, but when I called Jessica's room, her maid of honor answered, and informed me that Jessica was busy with professional photos. But I thought family photos were scheduled for before the ceremony, I said, checking the itinerary. Oh, they decided to do some earlier with just the bride and the Harringtons, she replied carelessly. You know how it is with timing and the perfect light and all that. I did not know, actually. What I did know was that once again I was being treated as an afterthought rather than an essential part of this day. When I finally saw Jessica in her wedding dress, my breath caught. Despite everything, she was still my little girl, and she looked radiant. For a brief moment, when our eyes met, I saw a flicker of the Jessica I had raised uncertain and seeking my approval. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Your mother would be so proud. Something passed across her face at the mention of Margaret, a shadow of sadness or perhaps guilt, but it was quickly replaced by her practiced smile as the wedding planner called for us to take our positions for the ceremony. Walking Jessica down the aisle was the one tradition that could not be taken from me. As we stood at the back of the elegant garden where the ceremony was being held, Jessica's hand resting lightly on my arm, I leaned close and whispered, I love you, Jessie. I had not called her by that childhood nickname in years. She squeezed my arm slightly in response, and then the music changed, signaling our entrance. For those brief moments walking down the aisle, I felt the weight of my role as her father. I was giving her away, entrusting her to a man I did not trust, because it was what she wanted. When we reached the altar and the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" my voice nearly broke as I responded, "I do." Then I stepped aside, taking my place in the front row alone on the bride's side while Derek's family filled the seats across the aisle. The ceremony proceeded with poetry readings by Derek's sisters, musical performances by conservatory-trained friends, and personal vows that Jessica had apparently written with help from a professional speechwriter Derek's mother had hired. I watched my daughter pledge her life to Derek, hoping against hope that he would prove my instincts wrong and be the husband she deserved. The wedding reception was held in the ballroom of Chicago's most exclusive hotel, a space transformed by thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and gauzy draperies. A string quartet played as guests moved from the cocktail hour to the main ballroom for dinner. The cost of this single evening could have paid for Jessica's entire college education. I stood near the entrance watching as guests found their escort cards and made their way to assigned tables. The head table was prominently positioned on a slightly raised platform, with Jessica and Derek in the center, flanked by his parents and the maid of honor and best man. Despite tradition, there was no place for me there. A wedding planner with a clipboard and earpiece approached me. "Mr. Matthews, you are at table 19. She pointed to a table in the far corner of the room, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. I checked my escort card. Indeed, it read, Table 19. As I made my way across the room, I passed tables filled with Derek's extended family business associates and college friends. Tables 1 through 10 seemed to be reserved for the most important guests, all connected to the Harrington family. At table 19, I found myself seated with some of Jessica's mother's distant relatives, who had been invited out of obligation, a couple of Jessica's former classmates, who had not made the cut for the bridal party, and an elderly man who introduced himself as Derek's great-uncle twice removed. Not exactly the place of honor for the father of the bride, the elderly man commented bluntly, having deduced who I was. In my day, the father of the bride would be seated at the head table. Times change, I suppose. I nodded uncomfortably, not wanting to criticize the arrangements openly. The elderly man who introduced himself as Harold turned out to be something of a black sheep in the Harrington family, having chosen a career in education rather than finance or law. Never quite fit the family mold, he explained with a wink, much to my father's eternal disappointment. As the reception began in earnest, I watched Jessica and Derek make their grand entrance to enthusiastic applause. They shared their first dance to a song I had never heard, though Jessica had once told me she wanted to dance to the same song Margaret and I had chosen for our wedding. Another change I had not been consulted about. The dinner service began with waiters delivering elaborate plates of food that looked more like art installations than meals. Wine flowed freely, and the volume of conversation increased as the evening progressed. From my distant vantage point, I could see Jessica laughing with Derek's mother, their heads close together in conversation. After the main course, the best man rose for his toast, sharing stories of Derek's accomplishments and their friendship since preparatory school. The maid of honor followed with an emotional speech about how Jessica had transformed during college into the sophisticated woman she was today. Neither mentioned me or the life Jessica had before meeting Derek. Then Derek's father stood commanding the room's attention without effort. When Derek first brought Jessica home, we knew she was special, he began. Over these past years, she has become the daughter we always wanted. Today, we officially welcome her into the Harrington family, though in our hearts, she has been a Harrington for some time now. The room applauded enthusiastically. I sat with my hands in my lap, feeling as though I was attending a ceremony where my daughter was being erased and replaced by this new version the Harringtons had molded. Traditionally, the father of the bride would offer a toast as well. I had prepared one staying up late in my hotel room the night before, carefully writing down memories of Jessica growing up and my wishes for her future happiness. But no one called on me to speak. The toasts concluded and waiters began serving dessert. It was during this lull in the proceedings that Derek decided to circulate among the tables, playing the role of gracious host. I watched as he made his way around the room, stopping for photos and accepting congratulations. His path eventually brought him to table 19. "Chip, having a good time way back here?" he asked loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "We had to put you somewhere right." He laughed as if he had made a clever joke. "The reception is lovely," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Jessica looks so happy." "She is happy," Derek agreed, then leaned closer as if sharing a confidence. "Though between us, I think she is relieved to finally move up in the world. No offense, but construction was never really her scene." Before I could respond to this deliberate provocation, he straightened and addressed the table at large. "I think they are cutting the cake soon. You should come up front, Chip, at least for that." I rose from my seat, grateful for the invitation, despite its condescending delivery. Derek led the way, weaving between tables toward the front of the ballroom, where Jessica was now standing near the elaborate 6-tier wedding cake. As we approached, Derek's friends from the head table noticed us and exchanged glances that immediately put me on guard. One of them, a tall man with slicked back hair, who I recognized as the one who had made the redneck comment the night before, smiled too widely as we approached. "Hey, Derek brought Jessica's dad up from the cheap seats," he called out just loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Derek laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "Thought he should have a front row seat for at least one part of the evening. Here, sir, take my chair." He pulled out a chair from a nearby table with an exaggerated flourish. Something in his manner should have warned me, but I was so grateful for the gesture of inclusion that I failed to see the trap. As I turned to sit down, thanking him for his consideration, Derek smoothly pulled the chair back just as my weight shifted. There was a moment of suspended animation as I realized what was happening, but physics was already in motion. I fell backward, my tailbone hitting the hard floor, first followed by my back. The wind knocked out of me in a painful rush. The sound of my fall seemed unnaturally loud in the ballroom, cutting through conversations and music. For a second, there was shocked silence. Then Derek burst into laughter, quickly joined by his groomsmen and several nearby guests. "Oh man, I cannot believe you fell for that," Derek howled, doubled over with mirth. "Classic chair pull. Did you get that on video?" he asked one of his friends who held up a smartphone with a thumbs up. I lay on the floor, pain radiating from my lower back and tailbone, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the humiliation washing over me. Dozens of eyes were on me, some wide with shock, others crinkled with amusement. Worst of all was Jessica's expression as she rushed over a mixture of embarrassment and mortification that was clearly not for my benefit, but for her own. "Dad," she hissed, reaching down to help me up, "do not make a scene." Not make a scene. I was not the one who had created this situation, yet somehow I was being blamed for it. With as much dignity as I could muster, I struggled to my feet, wincing at the sharp pain in my back. Derek was still chuckling, though making a belated show of concern. "Sorry about that, Chip. Just a bit of fun. No hard feelings, right? You are okay." One of the waiters hurried over with a replacement chair, looking genuinely concerned. "Sir, are you all right? Would you like some ice?" Before I could answer, Derek waved him away. "He is fine. Tough old construction worker, right? Chip built to take a beating." Jessica tugged at Derek's arm. "Let us do the cake cutting now," she said, clearly trying to move past the incident. She did not meet my eyes as she pulled him toward the cake table, leaving me standing alone, my back throbbing and my dignity in tatters. I considered leaving right then, walking out of the reception and driving straight back to Minnesota. But some stubborn part of me refused to give Derek the satisfaction. Instead, I made my way back to table 19, where Harold gave me a sympathetic look. "Nasty trick," he commented quietly. The boy always did have a mean streak. As I eased myself back into my chair, I watched Jessica and Derek pose for photos with the cake, their perfect smiles revealing nothing of the ugliness that had just transpired. In that moment, I realized that the daughter I had raised, the one who would have been appalled by such cruelty, was truly gone. In her place was this stranger who valued appearance over character, status over kindness, and her new family over the one who had sacrificed everything for her. The physical pain of my fall was just beginning, but the wound to my heart felt like it might never heal. I spent the next hour at table 19 in a fog of pain and humiliation. My tailbone throbbed with each shift in my seat, and my lower back had begun to stiffen. But the physical discomfort was secondary to the emotional devastation of what had just occurred. Not only had my new son-in-law deliberately humiliated me, but my own daughter had been more concerned about the disruption to her perfect wedding than about my well-being. The realization cut deeper than any physical injury could. As I sat nursing a glass of water, declining the wine that flowed freely at our table, I found myself remembering all the sacrifices I had made for Jessica. The endless nights working on blueprints after she had gone to bed, trying to grow my business while being a present father. The college funds I had scraped together dollar by dollar, often foregoing my own needs. The sale of my family's cabin, the last physical connection to my parents, and the memories of Margaret and Jessica there. I thought of Jessica's 16th birthday, when I had saved for months to buy her the laptop she needed for school. How her eyes had lit up with genuine gratitude, hugging me tightly and promising to make me proud with her studies. That Jessica seemed like a character from another life, now replaced by this polished stranger who looked at me with embarrassment rather than love. My dark thoughts were interrupted by an elderly woman who approached our table with a concerned expression. She introduced herself as Linda, Derek's great-aunt on his mother's side. "I saw what happened," she said quietly, taking the empty seat beside me. "That was no accident. Are you all right?" Her kindness, so unexpected in this sea of indifference and mockery, nearly undid me. I swallowed hard before answering. I will be fine. Just a bruised tailbone. And ego. Linda shook her head disapprovingly. Derek has always been indulged too much. Sylvia and Richard think his pranks are charming even when they are cruel. She patted my hand sympathetically. Jessica seems like such a lovely girl. I cannot imagine she approves of this behavior. I wanted to tell this kind woman that the Jessica she was imagining, the one who would stand up against cruelty, no longer existed, but I could not bring myself to speak ill of my daughter even now. She is caught up in the excitement of the day. I said diplomatically, though we both knew it was an excuse. Linda nodded, understanding more than I had said. These society weddings can turn even the sweetest girls into someone else entirely. The pressure to fit in is enormous. As the evening continued, Derek's humiliation campaign did not end with the chair incident. When the DJ announced it was time for the parent dances, I stood ready for my dance with Jessica. It was the one tradition I had been looking forward to, a chance to share a private moment with my daughter amid all the pageantry. But the DJ's next words froze me in place. And now the bride will share a special dance with Richard Harrington, who has been like a father to her these past few years. I watched, rooted to the spot, as Derek's father led Jessica onto the dance floor. They moved gracefully to a song I did not recognize, Richard beaming with pride, as if Jessica was truly his daughter. Jessica, for her part, looked completely at ease, laughing at something he said as they turned. There would be no father-daughter dance for me. This traditional moment, this rite of passage I had imagined since Jessica was a little girl, spinning in the living room to her mother's favorite songs, had been given to someone else. I sank back into my chair, the final blow delivered. Harold, who had been watching the proceedings with increasing disapproval, leaned over. In my 82 years, he said, I have never seen such disrespect to a father of the bride. In my day, this would have been unthinkable. I nodded beyond words at this point. The evening stretched before me like an eternity, each minute a fresh exercise in endurance. A young server named Michael stopped by our table, discreetly placing a napkin-wrapped bundle of ice beside me. For your back, sir, he said quietly. I saw what happened. Not right if you ask me. I thanked him, touched by this small act of kindness from a stranger, when my own family had shown none. Michael hesitated, then added, My father went through something similar with my sister's wedding. These fancy families, they think they can just erase where we come from. Before I could respond, he was called away by a supervisor, but his words stayed with me. Perhaps I was not alone in this experience of being discarded once I had served my purpose of raising a daughter who could be molded into someone else's idea of perfection. As the cake was served and the dancing became more energetic, I found myself unable to remain at the table. The pain in my back was intensifying, but more than that, I needed airspace away from the spectacle of my daughter's new life from which I had been so thoroughly excluded. I made my way to a small balcony off the ballroom, grateful to find it deserted. The Chicago skyline glittered before me, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadow. The cool night air was a balm after the stuffy, perfumed atmosphere of the reception. I had been there only a few minutes when I heard the balcony door open behind me. Linda appeared, followed by Michael, who was carrying a fresh ice pack and what looked like pain relievers. We thought you might need these, Linda said, as Michael offered the items. And perhaps some company from people who see what is happening. Thank you, I replied, genuinely moved by their concern. But you should not miss the reception on my account. Believe me, Linda snorted, I have seen enough Harrington weddings to last several lifetimes. They all blur together after a while, an endless parade of extravagance masking a shortage of genuine feeling. Michael nodded in agreement. I have worked these events for 3 years now. The fancier the wedding, the less love you tend to see. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, looking out at the city lights. Finally, Linda spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. What Derek did was cruel, and Jessica's response was deeply disappointing. But the question now is, what will you do about it? Do, I echoed. What can I do? Make more of a scene, embarrass Jessica further. Leave early and confirm their opinion of me as unsophisticated and emotional. Or, Michael suggested you could show them what real dignity looks like. My father always said that how we respond to humiliation reveals more about our character than any success ever could. His words struck a chord. Throughout my life, I had faced setbacks and challenges with resilience and integrity. I had taught Jessica those same values, even if she seemed to have forgotten them in the glitter of her new life. Perhaps it was time to remind her and myself of who I truly was. What do you suggest? I asked, looking between my unlikely allies. Linda's eyes twinkled with surprising mischief for a woman of her years. I think it is time the father of the bride had his say, do not you. As I stood on the balcony with Linda and Michael, a plan began to form in my mind. Not a plan for revenge or public humiliation, which would only lower me to Derek's level, but something that would allow me to reclaim my dignity and perhaps, just perhaps, reach whatever remained of the daughter I had raised. I have been silent all day, I said, straightening my shoulders despite the pain. Perhaps it is time I spoke up. Linda nodded approvingly. The father of the bride traditionally offers a toast. It is your right, even if they have overlooked it. Michael glanced at his watch. They will be serving champagne for the final toasts in about 15 minutes. That would be your moment. I took a deep breath, memories flooding back of all the times I had taught Jessica about dignity and respect. How to stand tall when others tried to diminish you. How to respond to cruelty with grace rather than more cruelty. Values that Margaret and I had instilled in her from the beginning. Values that seemed to have been erased by her desire to belong in Derek's world. I need to collect my thoughts, I said, and perhaps find the DJ. Michael grinned. I can help with that. He is a friend of mine. We returned to the ballroom where the celebration was in full swing. Derek was at the center of a group of his friends miming my fall to uproarious laughter. I caught snippets of their conversation as we passed. His face when he hit the floor. Classic move, Derek. Cannot believe the old guy fell for it. Did you see Jessica's face, totally mortified by her redneck dad? Their words strengthened my resolve. This was not just about me now, but about standing up against the casual cruelty that seemed to be Derek's stock in trade. Michael led me to the DJ's booth, introducing me and explaining the situation in low tones. The DJ, a young man with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, nodded sympathetically. No problem, sir. After this song ends, I will announce you for a special toast. I have got a wireless mic ready. I thanked him and moved to a quiet corner to gather my thoughts. What could I say that would maintain my dignity while also speaking truth? How could I reach Jessica without further alienating her? The words needed to come from my heart, but also from a place of strength rather than bitterness. As the upbeat dance number ended, the DJ's voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, before our final toasts of the evening, we have a special speaker. The father of the bride would like to say a few words. A murmur ran through the crowd as I walked to the center of the dance floor, accepting the microphone with a nod of thanks. All eyes turned to me, including Jessica's, wide with surprise and what looked like apprehension. Derek stood frozen near the bar, champagne glass in hand, his expression shifting from confusion to wariness. I took a deep breath and began. For those who do not know me, my name is Chip Matthews. I am Jessica's father. My voice was steady, stronger than I had expected. When my daughter was born 26 years ago, I made a promise to always protect her, support her, and teach her the values that matter most in life. The room had fallen completely silent now, the weight of attention almost palpable. My late wife Margaret and I raised Jessica to believe in hard work, honesty, and treating others with respect regardless of their station in life. We taught her that true worth comes not from what you own or who you know, but from the integrity with which you live your life. I paused, finding Jessica's eyes in the crowd. She was very still, her expression unreadable. Earlier tonight, I experienced something unexpected at my only daughter's wedding. As some of you saw, I was the victim of what some might call a prank. I fell to the ground when a chair was pulled from beneath me and many people laughed. An uncomfortable rustling moved through the audience. Several guests looked down, seemingly ashamed to have participated in the laughter. I could stand here and express anger or embarrassment. I could retaliate with unkind words. But that is not who I am, and it is not what I taught my daughter to be. I shifted my gaze to Derek, who was now looking distinctly uncomfortable. Instead, I want to share what I wish for Jessica and Derek as they begin their marriage. I wish for them to treat each other with the kindness and respect that forms the foundation of any lasting relationship. I wish for them to value each other's backgrounds and families, recognizing that we are all shaped by where we come from. My voice grew stronger as I continued drawing on a lifetime of quiet integrity that had guided me through my hardest moments. I built my construction company from nothing because I believed in creating something of value with my own two hands. I sold my family's cabin by the lake and worked weekends for years to ensure Jessica could attend the university of her choice. I did these things not for recognition or gratitude, but because that is what parents do for their children. We sacrifice. We put their needs above our own. We do whatever it takes to give them opportunities for happiness and success. I noticed several of the older guests nodding in agreement, including Harold and Linda. Even some of Derek's relatives seemed moved. "Jessica," I said, my voice softening as I addressed my daughter directly. "From the moment you were born, you have been the light of my life. Watching you grow into the beautiful, intelligent woman you are today has been my greatest joy. And while I may not fit easily into this new chapter of your life, please know that my love for you remains unchanged." Tears were flowing freely down Jessica's cheeks now, her composed facade cracking for the first time that day. To everyone here tonight, celebrating Jessica and Derek's union, I thank you for witnessing this important day in my daughter's life. Marriage is a journey with both smooth roads and difficult passages. My hope is that they navigate it with the same values of honesty, respect, and kindness that I have always tried to demonstrate. I raised my glass, which Michael had thoughtfully filled with champagne and brought to me as I spoke. To Jessica and Derek, may your life together be blessed with love, understanding, and mutual respect. The room erupted in applause, more enthusiastic than I had expected. Many guests were on their feet, including Harold and Linda. Even some of Derek's friends looked chastened, avoiding his eyes as they clapped. Derek himself stood rigid, his face flushed with what might have been shame or anger. Jessica was still crying, but her eyes never left my face as I placed the microphone on a nearby table and walked toward the gift table where I placed an envelope containing my wedding present, a check representing a significant portion of my savings, along with a heartfelt letter I had written the night before. With a final nod to the room at large, I walked with unhurried dignity toward the exit. I had said what needed to be said. I had maintained my integrity in the face of humiliation. And perhaps, just perhaps, I had reminded Jessica of the values that once meant something to her. As I reached the door, I heard quick footsteps behind me. I turned to find Jessica, her carefully styled hair now slightly disheveled, her makeup tracked with tears. "Dad," she said, her voice small and uncertain, so unlike the polished tones she had adopted in recent years. For a moment, we stood looking at each other, years of love and recent disappointment hanging in the air between us. I waited, giving her the space to speak. "I am so sorry," she whispered finally. "What Derek did was horrible. I should have stopped it. I should have defended you." I nodded, acknowledging her words without immediately absolving her. "Yes, you should have." She flinched slightly at my honesty, but continued. "Your speech, what you said about the values you and Mom taught me, it reminded me of who I used to be, who I want to be again. That Jessica is still inside you," I said gently. "She always has been." Jessica took a step forward, then hesitated. "Can you forgive me?" I looked at my daughter, seeing beyond the expensive dress and perfect makeup to the child I had raised, the young woman who had once valued character over status. "Forgiveness takes time, Jessica, but love that has never wavered." I opened my arms, and after a moment's hesitation, she stepped into them, burying her face against my shoulder, as she had done countless times as a child. Over her head, I could see Derek watching us from across the room, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion as his perfect, controlled wedding veered off script. "I should get back," Jessica said, finally pulling away and wiping her eyes. "But we need to talk tomorrow before Derek and I leave for our honeymoon. Please." I nodded, touching her cheek gently. "I will be here." As I finally left the reception, the weight of the evening's events pressed heavily on me, but beneath the exhaustion and physical pain was a glimmer of hope. I had stood my ground with dignity. I had spoken my truth without descending into bitterness. And just maybe I had begun the process of reclaiming my relationship with my daughter. The night air was cool against my face as I walked slowly to my truck, each step painful but purposeful. Whatever tomorrow would bring, I had remained true to myself and the values I had always lived by. In the end, that was what mattered most. The drive back to my hotel was a blur of city lights and swirling emotions. My back throbbed with each small movement, but the physical pain seemed distant compared to the emotional whirlwind of the evening. I had experienced humiliation, anger, and profound disappointment, but also unexpected support from strangers and a possible breakthrough with Jessica. Once in my room, I carefully lowered myself onto the bed, wincing as my tailbone protested. Sleep seemed impossible, my mind replaying the events of the day like a film on loop. The chair being pulled away, the laughter, the shock and betrayal, but also the dignity I had found in speaking my truth, and the tears in Jessica's eyes as I did so. Morning brought stiffness and discoloration spreading across my lower back. Moving was an exercise in determination as I packed my belongings and checked out of the hotel. Jessica had texted asking to meet for coffee before she and Derek departed for their honeymoon in the Maldives. Despite my physical discomfort, I agreed to meet her at a cafe near their condo. As I waited at a corner table nursing a black coffee and an over-the-counter pain reliever, my phone rang. It was Linda, Derek's great-aunt. "I wanted to check on you," she said without preamble. "That was quite a fall you took." "Sore, but I will survive," I replied, touched by her concern. "Thank you for your support last night." "Your speech was magnificent," she continued. "Dignified, honest, without being vindictive. You should know it had quite an impact. Several guests approached me afterward expressing their admiration for your composure." "Really?" I had not expected my words to resonate beyond Jessica. "Oh yes. Even Richard, Derek's father, seemed uncomfortable. I overheard him scolding Derek for the chair incident, calling it juvenile and inappropriate. Apparently, some of their more important business connections were not amused by such behavior at what was supposed to be a sophisticated affair. The knowledge that Derek's prank had backfired in the eyes of people whose opinion he valued brought a small measure of satisfaction, though I took no pleasure in revenge. What mattered more was that I had maintained my dignity in a situation designed to strip it away. As I ended the call with Linda promising to stay in touch, I saw Jessica enter the cafe. She looked different this morning, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, her face free of makeup, reminding me of the daughter I had known before Derek. She spotted me and hurried over, concern filling her expression as she noticed my careful movements. "Dad, you are really hurt," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Have you seen a doctor?" "Just bruising," I assured her. "It will heal." Jessica fidgeted with her coffee cup, clearly struggling with what to say. "I could not sleep last night," she finally admitted. "I kept thinking about everything, about how I have changed since meeting Derek, about how I have treated you." I listened, giving her the space to continue. "When you fell," she said, her voice catching, "my first reaction was embarrassment. Not concern for you, but worry about how it looked to everyone else. What kind of person does that make me?" "A human one," I replied gently. "We all make mistakes, Jessica. What matters is how we respond to them, what we learn." "I do not know who I am anymore," she confessed, tears gathering in her eyes. "Sometimes I catch myself saying or doing things that the old me would have hated. Being ashamed of where I came from, of you and the life we had. But that life, it was good, Dad. We were happy, were not we? Before I got so caught up in trying to be someone else. We had something precious." I agreed. "Not wealth or status, but love, respect, honesty. Values your mother and I tried to instill in you." Jessica wiped away a tear. "I miss Mom. She would have been so disappointed in me. She would have understood," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We all lose our way sometimes. What matters is finding the path back." We talked for nearly 2 hours, more openly than we had in years. Jessica shared how intimidated she had initially felt by Derek's world, how her desire to fit in had gradually transformed into a desperate need to erase her past, how Derek's subtle criticisms of her background had shaped her into someone eager to deny her roots. "After your speech last night," she said, "Derek was furious. He said you embarrassed him in front of everyone, but all you did was speak the truth with dignity. It made me see so clearly how different you are from him." "And where does that leave you?" I asked the question that had been hovering between us. Jessica sighed, twisting her new wedding ring. "I made vows yesterday. I cannot just walk away from them. But I need to find myself again, the real me. And I need to make Derek understand that my family, my background, they are not things to be ashamed of or erased." It was not the complete awakening I might have hoped for, but it was a start. As we prepared to part, Jessica hugged me tightly. "I am so sorry for everything, Dad. For letting you be humiliated, for not standing up for you, for all the ways I have hurt you while trying to become someone else." "I forgive you," I said, and meant it. "But Jessica, remember this. You do not need to become someone else to be worthy of love. You were always enough just as you were." She nodded, fresh tears spilling. "I will call you from the Maldives," she promised. "Every day." I watched her walk away, back toward the life she had chosen with Derek, but carrying a spark of her true self that had been rekindled. Whether that spark would grow or be extinguished again remained to be seen. The next few days were a physical challenge as my bruises deepened and movement remained painful. I returned to Minnesota to my empty house filled with memories of raising Jessica and my life with Margaret.